Tension is running high in the Palestinian occupied territories as well as on the Lebanese borders as the occupation armed forces carried out air raids in Lebanon on what it called Hamas targets hours after it launched air raids on the besieged Gaza Strip. The bombing in the early hours of the Friday came after the Zionist forces stormed Al-Aqsa Mosque in the occupied East Al-Quds twice this week, continuing the spate of barbaric aggression against the defenseless Palestinians during the holy month of Ramadan. Zionist army announced in a short statement on Friday that it is currently launching strikes on Lebanon. A Lebanese TV station reported explosions near a refugee camp in the southern port of city of Tyre, or Sor as it is called in Arabic. Hours earlier, there were explosions in Gaza after the Zionist Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised in a video statement to retaliate to any aggression. To this point, multiple questions come to the scene. What is the main target behind these Zionist strikes? Is it really the Hamas movement, as it is claimed by the entity, or to annihilate the Palestinian people? Were these attacks already planned and deliberately carried out by the Zionist newly elected government of the extremist Netanyahu? To answer all these questions, I'm joined live by Mr. Farouk Kasival, a political analyst and a management advisor from New Zealand. Also, Mr. John Phoenix, an international relations expert from England, alongside with Mr. Raed Al-Dab'i, political science lecturer at Al-Najah National University from Nablus, Palestine. Gentlemen, thank you so much for accepting our invitation to this debate. A short break and we start our L24 special coverage. So, as we delve into our discussion, let's watch this report on the latest Zionist aggression on Gaza Strip. Nabil Khazini, on what follow.
The time of dawn last night was the beginning of another day of airstrikes by the occupation forces against Gaza. Several areas in the Gaza Strip were hit in different rates, which started after midnight. The Palestinian Health Ministry reported no casualties. But death was yards away for Muhannad's family when 6 missiles hit outside their newly built house in Gaza City.
If I
was in the car, I would have died. Money and the car can be redeemed. But what does the citizens have to do in all of this? What do the children, my 2-year-old sister, my parents and my siblings have to do in all of this? This is residential area. There is nothing here but at home, crops, buildings, agricultural land.
In such moments of aggression, defense becomes a duty. Over the past night, 40 rockets were fired from Gaza towards the occupied territories adjacent to the Strip. Palestinian factions have announced that surface-to-air missiles were fired at occupation aircraft in the sky of Gaza. And because the occupation forces' scale of violence has reached Lebanon as well, there were answers from there too. Lebanese security sources said a number of rockets hit a small structure on farmland near the area from which the rockets had been launched by the occupation forces. Over the course of 2 nights, occupation police raised the scale of violence when they stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque in the occupied city of Al-Qudus, attacking and arresting hundreds of worshippers.
I would love to start our debate from one of our guests from Gaza, but so far he's not with us. So I'll be starting with you, Mr. John Phoenix. Based on your roots as Palestinians, probably you do have an idea. It's been proven recently that there is a state of instability within the Zionist entity about the military performance, given the size of dispute between the extremist occupation government and its army. Do you think that the latest aggression on Gaza and Al-Aqsa Mosque are a cover to deviate international opinion from the internal division inside the Zionist entity?
But surely from the beginning, as you notice, the internal issue, which is threatened the Zionist Netanyahu, threatened his fascist coalition, you know, they had to create a scapegoat, and the scapegoat in this case is the Palestinians in Gaza. Now, the whole issue started with the Zionist army attacking the Palestinian worshippers in Al-Aqsa. It had nothing to do with Hamas or with Gaza in the beginning. Because a lot of people watch the crimes committed, the attack on women and children in the holy place of Al-Aqsa. What they are doing inside Al-Aqsa, why they are there? This is a good question to be asked, you know. So they claim that some youth throw a stone at them. What they are doing in the mosque anyway? Nobody asked this question. So all this issue is invented in order to divert attention from Zionist Netanyahu crisis to outside. So in retaliation, obviously, as you notice, the Lebanese border, you know, with some missiles thrown from Lebanese border. Mm-hmm. The Palestinians in Gaza retaliated because this is a holy place for Muslims. It is Ramadan. And if you notice one thing, every Ramadan, they created such scenarios, you know, just to send a message that this obviously holy place is not belong to the Palestinians. They actually guide the settlers to walk in and to attack the Palestinians. I didn't see any retaliation by the army when the Zionist settlers attacking Palestinian worshippers. They watch them 24 hours. They actually guide them and give them, assistance to attend their so-called their rituals in the Al-Aqsa mosque. You know, so all this invented for Netanyahu just to escape his miserable crisis inside the entity. So I believe this was actually designed to because there was no reason for them to go inside Al-Aqsa with their shoes and attacking Palestinians. The coward that was beating up women and children too. Mm-hmm. That is what I believe.
Quietly understood. Coming to you, Mr. Farouk Kasibawi, based on the words of Mr. John Phoenix, he's saying that they all keep doing the same thing only during the holy month of Ramadan. I believe the main question that we should raise right now, for how long this kind of aggression should last? I mean, is the Arab nations in general and Palestinians, I'm talking about the factions, also I'm talking about the state, the official state, will they keep this, I believe, static situation? They will do nothing? They will always wait in Ramadan to be beaten, to be arrested?
Thank you very much for having me one more time. It's a pleasure to be on your screen one more time. What is currently happening is what was expected during our last episode. We expected the violence to increase, but I do want to make a comment regarding what has been happening over the past few years during the period of Ramadan. Ramadan over the past few years has been coinciding with the Jewish holiday for Passover or Hanukkah or Fisq, as we call it. It's been happening in the same time as Ramadan. And this, I believe, is a divine intervention in the issue itself, because during this holiday for the Jewish people, that Zionist faction of the Jewish religion becomes extremely agitated and wants to remove Al-Aqsa Mosque, may God protect Al-Aqsa, and build their own shrine in its place. This is why we've been seeing things that has been happening through the months of April, and has been increasing in violence in our holy months of Ramadan. Taking into consideration also the political arguments or the political face-offs that has been happening in the Jewish politics and the Zionist entity, all these actions lead the hard right government led by Netanyahu to use violence as a rhetoric to draw the attention away from what's happening in their political system. There is no real democracy in the Zionist entity. There is none of the rules of justice or fairness that they try to advocate as if they have it. And one more time, we're having evidence on the violence that has been used by this extremist group to take the land of Palestine over the last few years. There has been no other way in communicating or in dealing with the Zionist entity except for the violence that is being begotten from their violence. I take this opportunity also and remind you that last time we spoke about what could happen in Lebanon. At the moment, we are seeing that there is a new wave of missiles that are coming from Lebanon, but are not being adopted or not being taken into consideration by Hezbollah or any of the usual factions. Mm-hmm. That means that we are seeing new violence or new violent factions that are coming into the scene as a result of the violence that is coming from the Jewish entity. We can see that the missiles that are coming from Lebanon not necessarily have anything to do with Al-Aqsa, but also as a result of what has been shot over or across from the Zionist entity into Gaza and into Lebanon. So as a result, we see a situation that is becoming a highly volatile, and we see that the Zionist entity is the aggressor in this situation, whether in the mosque or whether by using hellfire missiles or by using different ordnance that are being thrown into different directions in the international community. Mm-hmm. That is being Gaza and Lebanon. So the violence is now breaking from inside Al-Aqsa Mosque to the adjacent areas. Of course, this is going to create more difficult and hardship lives or more difficult lives and hardship for those who are currently receiving them. This will inevitably lead to increase in violence, lead to increase in instability in the region. So where to from here? I'm not sure what Netanyahu wants to achieve, but he has achieved the goal of disturbing the peace in the region.
Mm-hmm. Quietly understood. I believe we have joined now with Mr. Raid. Raid, do you hear me, Mr. Raid?
Yes, I do.
Thank you so much for being with us. Now you are, I believe, in Nablus. That's what you have stated.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you so much. So I believe you are close to the situation over there. What does the situation look like now in Palestine, in Gaza, and in Al-Aqsa in general? And what about the reaction of the Palestinian factions so far?
Well, thank you for having me with you. First of all, what's going on at Al-Aqsa now, this daily invasion, this daily attack, preventing people to reach Al-Aqsa to practice their right of worship in their capital is part of the ideology and the mentality of this ultra-religious extreme government inside Israel. Gaza lives under siege since more than 16 years. All of West Bank under siege as well at this moment. We are unable to move from a city to another until the moment we have more than 110 murders at the beginning of this year, including children, older people, and civilian all over West Bank and Gaza Strip. And of course, that will lead to reaction and to the right of the people to protect themselves. What's going on at Al-Haram al-Sharif, at Al-Aqsa and Al-Aqsa Mosque will of course lead to reaction from the Palestinian people to protect their capital, to protect their right to pray in the holiest place for not just Palestinians, but for all Muslims all over the world. It's very clear that Netanyahu trying to jump his internal issues, his corruption cases, by more blood in the Palestinian side, and by trying to open more battles and one more front inside the Palestinian lands in order to jump his internal issues and the daily demonstrations against him, against his corruption, and against his coalition, which including for the very first time in the history of Israel, terrorist people, not terrorists as categorized by Palestinians, but a terrorist in the Israeli law. When we speak about Ben Gvir and Smotrich, we're speaking about a terrorist people who's been committed in terrorist attacks against Palestinians and against Israeli people in the Israeli law, putting the religion in the middle of this conflict and using a religious methodology in this conflict will lead definitely to the lose-lose situation where people will, of course, use all possible methods in order to protect their right to pray in their capital.
Perfectly understood. Thank you so much, Mr. Dab'ir Raed, with this explanation. Coming to you, Mr. John Phoenix, in face of the current developments and what occupied Al-Quds is witnessing in terms of security mobilization through the deployment of more than 2,000 personnel, in addition to putting a new checkpoint and closing the roads leading to the old city, do you believe that the occupiers' move aims to calm down the situation, or does it represent the state of fear that haunts the occupation authority?
Well, let's look at it this way. Before what's happening in Al-Aqsa, there is a 500 checkpoint in West Bank, which means every 10 minutes you have to be stopped nearly an hour to be searched and questioned and show your military ID. It's just to make the life of the Palestinians so hard. The movement is so difficult. So it's not the fact that you're going to add more checkpoints. The checkpoint really exists there. There is also something called mobile checkpoint, which means any military jeep can stop anytime and create a checkpoint. So the Palestinians will have a difficulty to move from town to town, area to area. So, for example, if you have to travel from Jerusalem to Jericho, 1 hour, it takes you in this situation 3-4 hours to reach Jericho from Jerusalem, because you will end up stopped 4 or 5 times in between within that hour. And if you notice, most of the checkpoint now, they design like animal gates. Animal cages, where your people can stay on this big metal cages and questioned. And then they take you away and they question you. So this is not a new, adding another 200 to the 500 is not going to make any difference. Palestinians have a right to defend themselves by international law. They have a right to resist. So I will not really agree that the word violence from both sides. There is no something called violence. It is a war against the Palestinian people. The Zionists use this violence against the Palestinians. Palestinians have a right to defend themselves and have a right to resist. So we call it resistance, not violence. So in this case, as I said earlier, the regime, the entity, the government of fascist Netanyahu, this is a government of settlers, and they supported the settler movement. The settlers daily taking lands, taking homes, attacking Palestinians, burning cars. Just 3-4 weeks ago, they attacked a little town called Hawara. It was a program. They was attacking people, burning their homes, burning their cars. There's no stability, as our guest, was warning that Netanyahu going to obviously imbalance the stability. Was no stability to talk about anyway. Al-Aqsa attack is daily. This is just having to be a major attack. Daily Palestinians got stopped, searched, young people being attacked and beaten up inside Al-Aqsa mosque. They searched for hours, suspected of carrying knives, which is not under the pretext that the Palestinians carrying knives. The youth will be stopped and obviously intimidated and provoked by the soldiers. So they can answer back and they get beaten up, arrested. The settlers have a free hand to take land, take homes, attacking Palestinians, burning their homes, forcing young men a few years ago to drink petrol and shot him in the stomach. So they buried him alive. So this crime is not new. It's not really, to be honest with you, when we describe that Netanyahu government and the government before that, Palestinians have been suffering for nearly 70 years of such brutal Zionist crimes. So the main thing that we had to remember, one thing, that the Palestinians will never give up. They had to keep their struggle until victory. And obviously, this is hopefully very soon.
Quietly understood. Mr. Farouk, there is almost unanimity that situation has changed internally and even regionally in light of the latest developments taking place. The situation now is heading toward either containment or escalation. In your opinion, what marks this stage?
At the moment, yes, you are right. We are facing either containment or escalation. I believe we are heading towards escalation. I believe we will face a new situation in the region at the moment, and that is chaos. A lot of people in Lebanon, in the adjacent countries in the area, are suffering extreme conditions, are suffering worsening conditions, whether economically or whether health-wise, whether as a result of the recent economic turmoil in Lebanon or as a result of the recent earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. I believe that any further escalation from the Israeli entity and the Israeli missiles into Lebanon, into Syria, into Gaza is going to lead to the people revolting. We are no longer expecting governments in the region to do anything, and we are not expecting armies to do anything. But we may be seeing a new development in the conflict, and that is the people taking matters into their own hands. I believe that the recent missile attack from Lebanon to the Zionist entity was not actually adopted by any of the usual players. Hamas has declared that they have nothing to do with it. Hezbollah has declared they have nothing to do with it. As a result, we are seeing new violent factions coming into the scene. We are seeing people taking matters into their own hands inside the Zionist entity itself. We are seeing Palestinians no longer waiting for the usual players, whether it's Hamas or whether it's the Liberation Front of Palestine, or whether it's any of the usual people that take the struggle of the Palestinians to the next step. At the moment, we're seeing Palestinians taking matters into their own hands, using their vehicles as weapons, using different, whatever is available in their hands in terms of weapons to protect themselves. At the same time, we're seeing the escalation becoming unapologetic from the armies of the occupying force. We're seeing them proudly beating innocent mosque goers. They're proudly parading themselves in front of the camera, hurting women, hurting girls, hurting children, hurting those who cannot defend themselves. This kind of action, these kind of footage that we are currently seeing from Al-Aqsa is no doubtly going to lead to escalation from normal people that cannot see a future, cannot see any peace or any brightness in the coming days, and therefore decide to take matters into their own hands and defend their land and defend their lives by themselves.
Very good indeed. Thank you so much, Mr. Farouk. So before coming to you, Mr. Raed, let me read this piece of information to our honorable guests. The Zionist Emergency Services announced that a settler was killed and 6 others were wounded in 2 run-over and shooting operations in the entity's capital. Hebrew media reported that gunmen opened fire, killing a settler and wounding 6 others, one of whom he was in serious condition, adding that 2 operations took place in 2 different areas in the entity's capital. So, based on this information, Mr. Raed, what does this operation represent for both sides, Palestinians and Zionist entity? And can we say it has a link to that one of Jordan?
Well, of course, as long there is occupation, it will be resistance. Let's never neglect the elephant in the room, which is the occupation. This kind of a brutal attack, live attack against the Palestinians just trying to practice their right of worship at Al-Aqsa Mosque will definitely lead to reactions by Palestinians. Israelis should understand very clear that for Palestinians, Al-Aqsa Mosque attack is cutting for all red lines. And Al-Aqsa Mosque is not just sensitive, but even it is the holiest place for all Palestinians, Muslims and the Christians. And of course, such crimes against humanity and such policies, not just at Al-Aqsa, by the way, we're suffering this situation since more than 75 years. The international neglecting of the Palestinian rights, Europe is fully occupied and fully busy with the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. America selling Palestinians just slogans without any kind of actions. Even Mr. Biden, who said that he will, for example, reopening the American embassy in Palestine, and he did not do at the moment. He just have slogans without any kind of actions. The normalization in the Gulf side, all of these factors will lead to a situation that Palestinians feel that they are alone, angry, and disappointment. And for sure, this will be reflected by a kind of self-defending operations. And what we witnessed today in Jordan Valley and in Tel Aviv, I think it will be repeated daily if we neglect the fact that there is occupation since more than 75 years. What's going on in the Palestinian side? Operations or using the right of the self-protection is a reflection to the Palestinian anger, reflection of the Palestinian attempt to protect themselves. But the main problem there in the occupation side, the main problem with the right-wing coalition that is fully protected by Netanyahu and his gang inside Israel, under the silent from the international community. Silent is complicity. And this ignorance by the international community to the right of Palestinians in the self-determination, or the right to reach to their capital, or the right to move freely, will of course lead to such operations, which is guaranteed by international law. By the way, Palestinians has every single right to defend themselves and to protect their dignity, their freedom, and their self-determination. If the world wants to reach to the win-win situation, the very only way should be started by ending this occupation. As our leader Marwan al-Barghouti said, that the first day of the stability in the region will come after ending this occupation. There is no security solution to the Palestinian suffering. The very only solution is a political one, which is based on ending this apartheid system and accepting the right of Palestinian people in the freedom, equality, and self-determination. Until the moment the international community do nothing in order to reach this point, and Palestinians has every single right to defend themselves in front of this apartheid and barbarian attack and daily attack and systemic violation of their rights by the Israeli right-wing government.
Correctly understood, Mr. Raed. I believe you do have raised very good points there is no solution but ending this occupation. Coming to you, Mr. John Phoenix, based on these operations, what are the implications of the Jordan that is named in Arabic Al-Ghur commando operation that led to the kill of 3 Zionists, as well as the operation in the capital, Tel Aviv?
Well, nothing going to happen. Most of the Jordan Valley been taken and occupied by the Zionist settlers. You know, if you make your listeners aware that most of the fertile land, agricultural land, was taken by the settlers from the Palestinian farmers. Obviously, this caused a lot of anger too. You know, where if you remember that there's a big settlement called Ma'ale Udumim. This is nearly a city, not a settlement, and controlling the whole area between Jericho and Jordan Valley. So Palestinians, to be honest with you, have nothing to lose. The only way for the Palestinians to achieve their goal is to continue resisting. The international community, in one hand, give you lip service to the Palestinians, and they support the Zionist regime. In 2014, when they were slaughtering Gazans, the British government was supplying the entity with military equipment. They were supporting them in the United Nations. They were voting against any condemnation against Israel. So if the Palestinians want to keep dreaming of the international community, they are really losing the battle. If the Palestinians also think that the Arab puppet regimes will do anything, I mean, the custodian of Al-Aqsa is supposed to be the puppet of Jordan, you know, he didn't say nothing. You know, we only have a statement, and the statements did not kick the Zionist ambassador to Amman. They didn't close the embassies. The same with Turkey, they just statements. So Palestinians had to take the matter in their hand, which means Palestinians have to continue their resistance. Without that, there's no way out to Palestinians. And this is what the situation in. And Palestinians under the international law, they have a right to defend themselves, a right to resist the occupiers. They are the illegal occupiers. The Palestinians, the righteous people who own the land, they are the native of the land.
Perfectly understood. Mr. Farouk, based on the words that has been just stated from Mr. John Phoenix, he's saying that kind of Palestinians now, they are all alone. No need to get help or support from Jordan or even from Iran. So based on also this commando operation that happened in Jordan, can we say link it to Al-Quds, what is happening in Al-Quds, or this is something just related to Jordan by itself?
The attack was not in Jordan. It was inside the Zionist entity territory. It was close to the Jordanian Ghor. And this is exactly what we were talking about. The Palestinians will never be alone. The Palestinians are part of the nation of Islam, of Ummat Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. They will never be alone. Al-Aqsa is part of the heart of every Muslim believer on earth. This is 1 billion and above people. It is not, they will never be alone. And this is what we were talking about, that people will take matters into their own hands. No one will accept oppression. No one will accept the degradation of our holy sites during our holy months. No one will accept to see people being victimized, innocent people, defenseless people, armless people being victimized by fully armed soldiers and do nothing. This is an escalation that is expected. The Jewish side knows this. They know that we are coming to a point where they will face everyone face to face, and the Muslims know it, the Christians know it, everyone knows it. It's a matter of when will this happen. And it seems that the crazy moves that are currently being done by the Zionist politicians are leading the whole earth into a confrontation. To continue to disrespect everyone, to continue to act in blatant racism, against one of the largest religions in the world at the moment, Islam, is basically the actions of someone who is wanting to see a new global confrontation. It is not to the benefit of anyone on earth now for us to start another war. As your guest said, the world is busy with the Ukrainian-Russian war in Europe. But at the same time, it's an opportunity for those who want violence. It's an opportunity for the terrorists in the Zionist regime to use the media blackout that is currently happening in Europe to abuse human rights, to abuse defenseless citizens of Palestine. Now, this is a double-edged sword, because while the United Nations, while the international community is busy with other incidents around the world and is not providing the proper protection or the proper support for the civilians in Palestine, what will happen is the violence will escalate and normal people will start to take matters into their own hands. The operation that happened in war near the Jordanian borders is just an example of what people will do once they get upset and they feel that there's nothing, no one that is fighting for their rights, and there is nothing being done to protect innocents. So what we will see there is people just using everyday equipment as a weapon, whether it's a car, whether it's a knife, whether it's anything that they can find in their hands, they will use it as a weapon and they will defend themselves and they will express their anger. Yes.
Quietly understood, Mr. Farouk. Mr. Raed, how did you find Hamas statements by approving the Jordan Valley or Al-Ghul operation? They really approved this and they put their blessings on this. What does it represent for you as a Palestinian?
Well, not just Hamas, but all the Palestinian political affiliations respecting the right of normal people to protect themselves. The operation today in Jordan Valley, by the way, it has been committed in occupied territories. Even according to the international law, any people under occupation had the right to defend themselves. So we have to understand very well that the operation today, it was part of the Palestinian self-defending. So I look to the statement of Hamas or to the statement of others, or to the collective understanding of all Palestinian people, that the resistance in the 1967, which is lands occupied in 1967, according to the international law, according to the UN resolutions, we have the full right to protect our people. We should again mention that the main elephant in the room is the occupation. The occupation is the main source of the unrest and instability in the whole region. Let's remember very well that at the moment, Israel occupy Palestine, attack Syria, attack Lebanon, occupy lands in Lebanon, and occupy Golan Heights in Syria. They attack even Iraq and Yemen. So the main source of instability in the whole region and even internationally is what is called the State of Israel. So it is the time to put things in its right order and to say things in its real name, that Israel is apartheid system. It's the longest occupation in the modern history, and Palestinians has every single right to defend themselves. I fully agree with your respected guests that what we see today is a personal and a very normal people using their right to defend themselves because they see every day humiliation, restriction of movement, apartheid system. So I look to the statement of Hamas or the statements of another Palestinian political parties that there is now a kind of consensus inside the Palestinian lands, especially in the occupied lands, that Palestinians had to take the lead, and that the resistance is the very only possible way and the possible path in order to shape the table for freedom and and for dignity. We tried as Palestinians everything. International community telling us slogans, statements, ink on paper since more than 75 years, even more from the English mandate on this land. And we're hearing statements about the right of Palestinian people in the self-determination. Now the Palestinians decided to take the lead and to shape the table by actions and by their lands and by resistance. And I fully agree that it is the right of the Palestinian people or any people under occupation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Raed. You joined me from Nablus, from Palestine. Also, Mr. John Phoenix, you joined me from England. Thank you ever so much for taking part in this first edition of the show that focus on Gaza Strip. Now, all I can say, thank you so much and take care. And a couple of minutes and we'll go for the second part of this show.